Hi, everyone. This is Daniel Giamario for our monthly video blog, and I am joined here today by Elise Hebert, and we're going to be doing part 4 of a long investigation, a really important part of our school's understanding of things, on the full spectrum of masculinity and femininity, which will then bring up the topics of intimacy, sex, gender, relationship approaches, and so on. So it's a rather major topic. In fact, it's a topic that we have an entire one of our certification courses dedicated to this, our course number 3 in the level 1 certification process on this topic. And I'm going to just briefly summarize what we've done up to this point, and then why we're taking this further now, because it is like a lot of material here, but there's certain elements of it that I like to uh, bring up that we have discussed before. So we have a starting point, because I know there's some individuals out there that this may be they might not have listened to the first 3, okay? They've just come in on number 4. And so the approach we have in the school is that, first and foremost, we're all human. Whether you're whatever gender, whatever sex, we're all human first. Now, the approach we take here is to, and what I'm going to be sharing here, what we'll be sharing here today, covers 99.5% of the population. And that is that then, after being this category that we're all human, okay, then it's like about 50% of the population is XX chromosome, and 50% of the population is XY chromosome. So we do value the original biological reality of whether you're a man or a woman. Then there has been so many different varieties of ways in the last 5-10 years to be able to see the difference between sex and gender. And there's confusion around those words, where if I go back to the early 70s, when I first got into this stuff, gender was clearly understood as being a social construct. So therefore different cultures would have a different view about what men are supposed to be or what women are supposed to be. There's different ways of teasing that out. We in our school have this idea that there's, at this time in history, and we've come up with images on it, that there are 24 genders. We could say there are 12 legitimate, authentic expressions about how you can be a biological male, and then there are 12 authentic expressions of how you could be a biological female. And this is not fixed in concrete. I mean, that if we went back 100 years, it would look different. It also would be different depending on if you're in Western Europe or the United States, or if you happen to be in the Philippines, for example, or if you happen to be in an Islamic country, if you happen to be in other parts of the world. Then the framework that I'm sharing, that we're sharing here with the archetypes, is going to look a little different. So again, there's no dogma to this, except that we are using a framework that I think works real well, and it solves some of the problems that are out there in how to look at sex and gender. So the next thing I want to bring up is that in our school, if you're biologically male, then the Mars position is the intended version of the masculine through different full spectrum of different possibilities of gender, of whatever the different expression of it would be by archetype. And if a person is biologically female, then there will be 12 different authentic expressions of that. And this is way different than, say, the 1950s version of what men are supposed to be or what women are supposed to be. It's one that is relating to this exploratory time where many individuals recognize that what the culture's view of it is very limiting, and there's a lot of inquiry and exploration about all of this. And what we're going to be continuing to share here together would be some of the ones we haven't covered before in part 1, 2, and 3, but also to go through first a topic that we did not go into as much, which are what we call the relational categories, and how that connects to this full spectrum of possibilities that we can see on the chart through Venus and Mars. Just one more starting point here is that, as I mentioned, we have a whole course 3 on this topic. And one of the most important ingredients of that is what would be the goal of knowing any of this stuff at a foundational level. It's to create what we call the inner sacred marriage process, which ends up unifying Venus and Mars on each chart, and that can help create inner wholeness. Now, it is in fact the case that the more you can create inner wholeness, it is going to make your relational life better. That's true. But the goal really is wholeness. And if the side effect of that is making better choices or having better ways of understanding who you're with, well, then that's a tremendous bonus. And so the other thing we will go through also today are the 6 archetypal pathways of relationship intent. Okay, and so that's also part of our investigation. And I'm having yet again the opportunity to share this with Elise, because as a therapist and as a researcher into the same topics, she has a lot to share about this topic also.
Thank you for that introduction. So although I'm not a psychotherapist per se, I've had a lot of training in psychology and call myself an astrological counselor because I, that's the area that excites me the most, helping people really fully understand their astrological complexes or lessons they came to learn, and really intrigues me. So I'm happy to be here.
And also, I will say, you and I have had our own unique personal experiences with these topics, right? So we're happy to bring that forth also as we go through.
Meaning our own, not personal you and me, but personal.
Right. That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That makes it really rich as well.
So let's go to our go through some of these slides we have for today.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Yeah, go ahead.
The full spectrum of the archetypal masculine and the archetypal feminine in intimacy, sexuality, and relationships. Now, I defined Mars and Venus in this system, and just for those that might be newcomers to our paradigm who might be watching this today, we place more attention on Venus and Mars than the sun sign. The sun sign, I'm not saying it's lacking in importance, but it's more generalized. The actual identity of which particular archetype of the masculine and feminine that a person is investigating shows up more as Venus and Mars. But the other point here would be that it's important to recognize that once we know what the Venus and Mars positions are, that's not necessarily how you are, but rather it's a statement of intent. It's what a person is working on, as if it is a number of instructions. You know, we can say that many parts of the horoscope are a set of instructions. And in the topic we're looking at today, Venus and Mars have the most important part. If you have a birth time, then you can have the understanding of what the ascendant and the descendant is, and that will be a part of our conversation here today, which is the relationship axes that give clues as to if you're going to be in a relationship, why do you want to do that? And how can you tell if you're on the right track? So let's go to that next slide. So this is also something those of you who've seen the first parts of this inquiry will remember seeing. And this is actually showing that a biological female or a biological male, it could actually be more toward yin or more toward yang. So for example, a woman with Venus in Aries, Leo, Scorpio, the ones on the far left, are far more over toward the yang, the actional aspect of the way a person can be in the world. While if a person is biological male, if they happen to have the ones on the right there, like Virgo, Libra, Taurus, Cancer, Pisces, then they're way more toward what would be considered yin. Now, this is not the same thing as saying that men who have those Mars positions are therefore then more, quote, feminine, right? But rather it's just more yin and not the generally understood version of masculinity that would have come from 1950s or heavily patriarchal kinds of cultures. And the same thing that would apply here to women who have the archetypes that are way over toward the yang, then they will not be the ones who are the classically understood versions of what a woman is supposed to be. If you get what I mean here, like maybe the simplest way that I could put this is that any woman biologically intact could be a mother, but only certain expressions, certain archetypal expressions are mothers. You know, it's so there's plenty of times where a man might be more into being a provider of nourishment than the woman he's with. Or there could be cases a lot now where the woman is the alpha, and she happens to be, you know, with a partner who is just there to be the provider of nourishment to her. So
Right.
these are all possibilities that show up when we look at this spectrum.
And we've said this before in other
Mhm.
parts of this series, but for those who are just maybe seeing this for the first time, what's amazing about this paradigm, this astrology paradigm, and then this spectrum of yang and yin is that it's these different gender expressions that are all equal and valid. And just how validating that is for, say, maybe a man that's over here in the yin or a woman that's over here in the yang, because of the way a lot of us have grown up. That's changing now with the younger gens, but still, it's still there.
Mm. Totally is, yeah. And yeah, so let's dive into the relational categories, which is not something we've covered before. And again, none of this material that is being shared here is in any way dogmatic. What I mean by that, it's not like a cookbook, you know, these things always are a certain way, but this gives a broader sense of the authentic possibilities.
Right.
So let's go through these different ones, and this can open up to some really good discussion.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the signs that we were really hoping to go further into today are Aries, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Scorpio, and Cancer. So we'll be kind of highlighting those as we go through.
Yeah, while we did discuss Cancer before, I thought it would be useful to look at that again due to the fact that the current Mars overstory, synodic cycle overstory for the next 25 months is Cancer. That just
Right,
started in January. So that's an important one for us to reference again.
right.
So first category, I'm calling it personal, personally relational, one-to-one, non-hierarchical. We could think of it as being like across the table from another.
Mhm.
Ability to share the most personal content of one's life. Personal qualities of this type are not definable. This personableness is what a person means when they say, I want to be loved for me. Not your how much money you have, not how you look, not your resume, you know, not any of those external qualities, but more the internal essence of what could be called personal. And the two primary astrological archetypes that are in this category are Taurus and Libra. Now, if we think of that, if we think of Libra, that would include its opposite, Aries. And we'll see that when we get to the, again, or dive into the relational intent, relationship axes of relational intent. But Libra would go with Aries if Aries has as its intent the commitment to a personal relationship. So those two can operate together on that horizontal approach, right across the table from another person, non-hierarchical. Taurus can be added together with Scorpio, but the Taurian Scorpio axis is also deeply personal, but it's not the same as Libra Aries, which would be primarily about being a pair bonder. We'll get to that here shortly. So the emphasis with Scorpio and Taurus is intimacy as art, or the ability to go into personal intimacy for its own sake. Not to satisfy a marriage vow, not to bring kids in. I mean, they can do that also, but we're looking at the leading edge of it. So these are the ones that are most personal.
Okay. Transpersonal.
These have personal qualities that are greatly valued, but are applied to everyone collectively and universally without the interest or ability to choose one specific person. You know, so it's very interesting here because it's like if Pisces, for example, can be very personal and be a giver, but it's not designated to be, oh, just my kids or just my partner. It's a desire to be of help, of service, of sensitivity, of going into rapport, feeling another person's feelings and everything in a transpersonal way, which would actually also include all sentient beings, you know, so it would have to do with animals and plants, you know, and so this is why often this one is in a category historically of a category called renuncia, an individual who chooses not to be a, quote, householder, but who is this transpersonal being who is a values the personal, but is not identified with certain people, right?
Right.
Now, Aquarius is interesting to be put in here because it's kind of its own category. It can pretty much be anything at once, but it also has the quality of being a free electron and not having the feeling function. You know, so it can have a intellectual understanding of what personal is, but it remains sort of detached and separate from it. So it can understand it, but it doesn't go down into the personal itself. It might actually be able to write an intellectual treatise on personal, but but
Yeah.
but are not particularly personal themselves. And I think that anyone who's listening to this who happens to have a partner, Venus or Mars in Aquarius, or even Aquarius moon, will understand what I'm talking about. You know, where they can be bright, brilliant, amazingly clear thinking, but they don't know what the personal really is. I mean, as far as the connection there. Okay.
I do want to add one thing because all people who are watching this are going to be at all different levels of understanding.
Yes.
And for example, like you can just look at Aquarius as is, but if Aquarius has a natal aspect to it, say Neptune or
Mhm.
yeah, say Neptune, for example, that would change the quality of it. So
But in that case, it would be even more transpersonal.
that's true. That's true, but less maybe emotionally detached.
You're right.
So just to say that we're talking about the pure archetype itself, but then it can be sort of altered by the natal aspects that might be hitting it.
And again, just I can't overemphasize this. When you see these words, Pisces and Aquarius, do not immediately think of your sun sign.
Right.
These are specifically about the statements of intent. For women, it would be their Venus position. If it's their Mars position, then it's a projection onto the other. And if it's a man, it would be his Mars in Aquarius, and Venus is what he would be looking for with the other. And actually, that's something I forgot to mention at the beginning. So we have a nomenclature which is same-sex planet and opposite-sex planet. You know, so if a person is biologically male, then it's their Mars position, and then the opposite sex planet would be their Venus position. And actually, this would apply archetypally more so than what is the actual biological sex of the other person. So in other words, this would apply to men who are in same-sex relationship, women who are in same-sex relationship, and so on. So it would be the projected image would be the for a woman, the Mars position, or the Venus position for a man. Okay, let's go to the next category, impersonal. Aha. The impersonal mystery schools are either not interested in or don't have the capability of being personal or transpersonal in a sense of valuing or honoring the personal qualities and content. Associated with the impersonal are Virgo, Capricorn, and in certain ways, Gemini and Sagittarius. It's interesting with Gemini because they can actually act out being personal, but they're not really. Or Sagittarius would be, which is an example of one along with Virgo that are frequently in a more renunciate category. There's a commitment with Sagittarius to be utterly free. And so they can have like a trail mate or a quest mate, but it ends being it's in an impersonal category because they're more consumed or concerned with truth and consciousness and meaning and purpose than on the personal. Virgo, probably well understood as being impersonal. There's no training in the Virgo mystery school for how to be personal. And then if you put those two together, I mean, Capricorn, if it's a householder, can actually be personal in a hierarchical sense. But if you put the two of those together, the value of both Virgo and Capricorn, the avoiding of the personal is what allows them to do their sacred function, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
Virgo can't be Virgo if they're relating personally. If Capricorn is in a business management position or some sort of hierarchical leadership position, it's well known for not caring that much about what the personal relationships are, because it would be the project that's more important,
Right.
the practical aspects of it that are more important.
Mhm.
So here we are with hierarchical. These mystery schools of life are authentically hierarchical. There's some kind of ranking with an intended distancing in order to perform their function. Examples are like parents to children, teachers to students, gurus to chelas, therapists to clients. And this could actually be thought of on any individual horoscope if you have a birth time, the vertical axis, where we have the idea there is like either Cancer or Capricorn, or at the top or bottom. It's the Cancer Capricorn axis, which is hierarchical. Virgo and Pisces occasionally, depending on what their function in the world is, can also be hierarchical. And how can Virgo be hierarchical? Well, if the function of Virgo is to be like, say, the seer or the high priestess or the priest, they're impersonal and hierarchical, if you catch what I mean there. And the same thing with Pisces. If it's a renunciate version of it, it's hierarchical in the sense of like say a Mother Teresa figure, or the individual who is the Mother Superior at a, at a convent or something like that. I mean, we can come up with a lot of different examples of this. The woman who's in charge of a home for disabled children, they're caring in a transpersonal way, but they're in charge. So if the individual is in charge, then it would be hierarchical.
Right. So here we are at pair bonding.
Right. This is an issue that's very important to people today, particularly the younger generation. And how I'm defining pair bonding is finding one person to mate or bond with, generally understood to be for life, although these days that old marriage vow, till death do us part, seldom applies. Um, so we're talking about a commitment, but it could be 7 years, something other than fly by night, or recreational. And generally, when people think of pair bonding, it often includes the concept of monogamy. We will explore that more in just a moment. This paradigm holds that pair bonding is a completely natural intention of some, but not all, or actually even most people. So there has tended to be this cultural view that you're supposed to do that. I can actually tell you just a very quick little story. I was giving many years ago a relationship workshop, and I was talking about all these different categories, all these different possibilities, all these authentic ways of authentically knowing your archetype and doing relationship. And at the end, at the end of it, this woman, fierce, I'm sure she was an Amazonian type, and she came up to me like right in my face and says, "Now, come on, I really enjoyed your presentation, but you have to admit the only way to become enlightened is in a long-term monogamous committed relationship." and and I said, "Well, no, I don't agree. That may be your reality." But I'm not going to say that for everybody.
I wonder if you could just speak to that, because even when I just read that, I get surprised by that statement.
Which one?
It's probably because we've been culturally trained to believe that it's completely pair bonding is completely natural, but not for all or even most people.
Mhm.
Can you just say a few words about that?
Well, I think this bullet point number 3, the pair bond intention is most always found with Libra and Aries mystery schools as a relational choice. So basically, it's a mutual choice that this is the way we want to do it. And it's not like it's some biological necessity, but in fact, it can be chosen. And for many people, for many different reasons, that works best that way. Okay. And so we included here Capricorn and Cancer, a choice motivated by the practical realities of raising a family in a patriarchal culture. So if two people get together to have kids, in the first years of having those children, it's often far practically um, there's practical reasons for those parents not to be doing what wife swapping, or or going totally into polyamory or something like that, or musical chairs on that, because it can be very confusing to raising children. But
It's
that's
also very tiring. It's tiring
right.
raising children. So,
But this is more recent times. I mean, there are other times in history where what is being written there would not necessarily apply.
mm.
It's a more patriarchal application of this. Now, I did want to discuss for a moment the um, the different versions of this. The emphasis here is on the bond. I'm with you, you're with me, we agree, we are a pair bond. Okay, but there can be variations here. And I call it the right wing and the left wing of pair bonding. The right wing of pair bonding is sort of fundamentalist pair bonding, which can show up like where you're together with someone and it makes the other person uncomfortable if you even notice someone else. So it's kept within extremely tight boundaries. Okay. Actually, there's a spiritual version of that, where your whole focus is just on the beloved, and the beloved is in the form of that person you're married to or that you've committed to. But then there's also it's fairly rare, the extreme left wing of pair bonding. Again, the emphasis is on the bond with your primary partner, but there, for a variety of reasons, it could be certain cycles, it could be just certain archetypal expressions, where it's decided among the two of them that they can bring other people into their intimacy. But it's for the purpose of developing greater depth in the bond. So it's really designed for that purpose, And you I think gave an example before we started this conversation today. There could be like an individual, two people in a pair bond, and it turns out that one of them, it could be the man or the woman, or if you're two men together or two women together, one of the partners is having some kind of traumatic dysfunction in intimacy. And it could be suggested that they get some education there, by by being with a person will help them with that. But that's designed to make the bond stronger. And I've seen this mainly with Libra Aries and then this other example, Cancer Capricorn.
You have seen it with Cancer and Capricorn?
I mean, I'm talking about where the pair bonding choice
Oh, gotcha.
is not only the best choice, but also the natural choice.
Right.
And where, in fact, it occurs to me, since we're going to be looking at another one here in a moment, let's say we take the concept of freedom, the freedom to choose. And of course, in our school, we emphasize free will a great deal. And so a good example of this is the extreme difference between what freedom would be for a pair bonder and what freedom would be for the free electrons, like Aquarius or Gemini. For Aquarius or Gemini, obviously, to be free of any bond is the greatest thing that could ever happen. But for those who are pair bonding, the commitment to the bond is freedom.
The commitment to the bond is freedom because
you are clear, 100% clear in the choice you've made. There's no deviation from it. And I've heard this from many clients that are in a very functioning and healthy bond with a partner. And they're just, it gives them the freedom to be everything they can be because of the commitment. So the commitment itself can be freeing in much the same way as the alternative understanding of freedom, which shows up with some of the other archetypes is, well, obviously freedom means to be free of any bond. So
right.
it's just two different two different archetypal versions.
Right. That also makes me think of this idea of if you are freely choosing another person and you are pair bonding, which includes monogamy, that you're then inside of a sort of like alchemical flask where you can
Right.
go deep and develop something, and the commitment, or the, say, maybe you could say safety, is understood, that we're
Totally.
together
And
building something.
it's only with that relational choice and the commitment to it that a statement that many other people raise their eyes and say, what the, I know, that's ridiculous, is the statement, my partner, if you say if it's a man with a woman, you know, she is all women to me. So it's, you know, it's only within that framework that makes sense, you know. And there are people, let's say, that might spend 20, 30 years of their life not being yet at that place, and then they will, because maybe they've had the chance to explore many different options, and then they realize that what works best for them is to have that relational choice, and then having that all be there. So you're in that cauldron of that cauldron of initiation that allows you to see all the qualities in the person you've chosen to be with. Okay, so the next one. So here, this is just a follow-up to what we were talking about
Yeah.
before. The authentic intention for monogamy is defined as sexual intimacy with only one person at a time, either serially or for life. And monogamy and pair bonding are not always equivalent. That is why we talked about this other version of it in the previous, with the previous slide. There's a continuum that holds a wide range of possibilities. So I just jumped ahead and gave the continuum before we got to this slide.
Right.
So what do we have next? Oh, polyamory. Yes. Defined as the ability and desire to be personally intimate, including sexually, with more than one person at a time without any reference to a pair bond. This path is not the same as promiscuity or recreational sexuality. It is deeply personally intimate, and it includes all sexual relationships with individual agreements. Certain ancient cultures had great respect for this way of life, the way of the courtesan. An independent person who can choose to be, for varieties of reasons, to be with more than one partner, and not for the sake of a marriage, or not for the sake of bringing children in. The mystery schools of polyamory are mainly Scorpio, Taurus, and sometimes Leo. But it's, for the most part, it's the Taurus and Scorpio, because it's personal. And this is emphasizing strongly the strength, the most interesting combination that exists in the archetypes, which is full, complete autonomy with personal intimacy as art.
Mm. Right. When you say,
Go
oh,
ahead.
when you say, and sometimes Leo, can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a version of Leo that is maybe more on the recreational side, or the rock star that has so many who want to be with him. And so that would be, and in fact, if we look back to the late 60s, early 70s, there was such a mutuality of agreement on that. I mean, a lot of times the guys that were in those positions eventually got tired of it. It's like there's just too many choices, and they mainly ended up being more pair bonders later in their life. So the polyamory can happen that way with Leo, and and uh, and then occasionally you can have Leo being polyamorous, that can't, depending on other stuff, can be also personal. But for the most part, it's not personal. It tends to be more of a hierarchical version of it.
Mm.
Where the king gets to be with whomever he wants to be with. The leading man or leading woman gets to be with whomever they want to be. And even with a good heart, there's really no risk in it. And then you have maybe a king who says, well, it's better if I'm married to a queen, but maybe they're not spending a lot of time, or the president of some country, that it's better in our more modern times that they're not bachelors. um, but anyway, I mean, that's the best I can do on that part.
All righty. The free electron.
Which we've already introduced. Here, the natural and authentic intention is for freedom, autonomy, spaciousness, and unencumbered non-attachment. Deep personal intimacy is not a high priority, and the concept of pair bonding is perceived of as bondage. Personal intimacy and sexuality can be recreational, adventurous, experimental, or it can just simply be very low on the priority list. And we would find that with Gemini, Sagittarius, Aquarius, sometimes Leo. These are the by far the ones that just maybe I don't want to make it into like saying the shadow side of it, because there is actually a very authentic version of recreational intimacy. It's just for fun, just for play. And we certainly don't want to be judgmental about that. But of course, the problem can be is if the person you're with, and you're one of these archetypes, is looking for something different, then there can be a lot of damage and trauma that can happen from that.
Yeah. How do you look at this? Because we're primarily talking about somebody's Venus and somebody's Mars. But if somebody has a moon, let's say, is one of these moons, I guess it depends on how identified with their moon they are, where this might show up. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, and actually, this has more to do with just an overall understanding of the chart. That if you have an understanding of what the relational category is for the moon, and you just basically use these archetypes that we're looking at and apply them to the moon, and that would suggest what that person would have been familiar with before they came into the life. Now, if that stands in marked contrast from the Venus or Mars position, then that's when you really have to take a look at that. I mean, let's say an Aquarius moon who has Venus or Mars in Libra. That's a total shift of categories. Or a Virgo moon who now has Venus or Mars in Cancer. I mean, It's a total change in categories, and that ends up being one of the most useful things that a counseling astrologer can be aware of, is looking at those contrasts.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for that. Really helpful. So the renunciate.
A relational path that is non-secular, non-relational, and non-personal. Now, this word, in earlier times, even like maybe 2,000 years ago or further back, they would divide human beings into either renunciates or householders. And so the renunciates would be the ones who would not be expected to marry or have kids. And there are traces of that, particularly with the moon positions in Virgo, Pisces, Sagittarius. So we can actually make the assessment in looking at a chart that if a person's moon is there, that's likely, they wouldn't have had any background in a householder or personal relationship. I'm using the word householder also in its older meaning. Doesn't Younger people will sometimes say to me, householder, does that mean you have to own a house? No, no. It means you're making more secular choices in order to be in the world, get married, have a family, things like that, So householder is contrasted from renunciate. We certainly these days see way more categories than just a distinction between householder or renunciate. But I put this in here because in the current age, most of the archetypes are on some kind of relational path. I mean, I've heard it said, this was as far back as the 70s, that personal relationship is like, in a sense, the primary yoga of our age. Which is why the first thing almost anybody says when they want a session is, I want to find out about when I'm going to meet the beloved, or what are the challenges I'm having in my personal relationship. I've been alone now for a long time. Anyway, those kind of things that are right on the front lines these days. But it's important, I think, to know that this is, in fact, a very legitimate category. And very often, the ones that have been renunciate before, I would say good 95% of the time in the current life, they're working on relational stuff. But we have to have a lot of compassion for those individuals because they don't have a background in it, so they're beginners.
Yeah, beautiful. I've said it before and I'll say it again, but looking at the charts in this way with this paradigm does generate a lot of self-compassion and compassion for the other.
Yeah.
Especially relationally. It really can have people, I want to say, calm down a little bit about what they're not getting when they get a deeper understanding of the other in an archetypal way.
I will announce here right at this moment that we will be having a part 5, and part 5 is going to have as a major feature of it, um, relational counseling. Basically how this material can really help getting to know who you're with better, and how two people who are trying to make it work in a relationship can be helped by this information.
Right. Very important to know how the other wants to be honored. All right. Our last category, sacred relationship.
It's not pair bonding, not polyamory, not recreational, not secular, and not personal. Primary characteristics: healing can take place and the relating takes place in sacred space. Generally a connection with the process of initiation. Often the experiences happen outside of time and or in secret. Included here are varieties of sexual healing modalities, some tantric aspects, forms of sexual spiritual initiation, certain kinds of shamanism, and ecstatic rites of passage. Now, this is a very tricky one because in order to, if you, for example, think that's the one either you are or that you want, there are many, many pitfalls. here. I've been in over the years involved as kind of the court astrologer in a lot of different organizations that were advocating sacred relationship, and it's really to do it well. You either have to be transpersonal or impersonal, or be in a partnership, so you're not projected on. And it's really difficult to do it well if the person who is the one conducting the sacred relationship still has personal needs. Because then there's, oh my goodness, I mean, ever since the what was it called, the you know, like 20, 30 years ago, when coming out of the closet was all kinds of sexual abuse and, you know, violation, and then the Me Too movement and all of that. They're mainly encountering the shadow here of this type of stuff. But it can be done. I mean, there's an ancient history on this one. Pre-patriarchal times. So, you know, a guy goes hunting, you know, he goes to war, and before returning to his wife and family, he would actually go be with one of the healing women. You
In the
know, and
temple.
it wouldn't be to find a girlfriend, and often it would be done in a mask, or you know, in the dark, or some form of ecstatic rite of passage, you know, and it would be done specifically as a sacred, this category, sacred relationship. It says most often connected with Virgo, Pisces. Interestingly, sometimes Gemini. I mean, that's the imagery that would be associated with Dionysus, uh, Pisces and Gemini. Also, we could also put Virgo, I'm sorry, Scorpio and Taurus in here, obviously, also. That should have been listed those in here. The long history of humanity, where when a boy or a girl came of age, you know, in puberty, there would be different cultures that would have sending the boy to an older woman, or, you know, or sending the girl to, you know, to some kind of initiatory process, you know. So that's a much richer, deeper subject than we have time to get into right now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of there are people I know right now that are exploring this kind of stuff in a quite a integrous way.
Maybe another time it'd be good or interesting to hear about that, how they are navigating something that does have a lot of pitfalls within it.
I know about these pitfalls because a lot of the ones that are in these professions sometimes, we talk about the pitfalls all the time, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I've noticed that there's only certain ways that it can happen in a without the shadow aspects of it. But this is a real category, a
Mm.
real thing,
Yeah.
and it can actually show up in that previous uh, category we looked at, where the pair bonding category is expanded to the left wing of it, you know, where there could be a stuckness at a certain point where one of the partners, one of the ones in the relationship, could stand having this kind of education.
Right. Right. That I can easily see.
It
Uh,
occurs to me, based on the amount of time that we've spent on this so far,
yeah.
maybe we will not do the uh, six paths of relationship this
Right.
time,
Okay.
but to spend the rest of our video blog on the ones we haven't looked at so
Yeah.
far.
Hmm. I think that's a good idea.
Mm.
We can start with Aries. And so, oh, go
Yes,
ahead.
I'm just going to say, so we went back at that very first slide we looked at, one of the first ones. was that spectrum of yin and yang. And so whether it's a biological male or female, Aries is in that very, the closest proximity. Maybe Leo might have a problem with this statement. They both are the closest proximity to the yang, maximum yang. For Aries, probably the essential word that is most important to know for Aries is the word commitment. Black and white, all in. Now, as a relational approach, not every Aries archetype, male or female, is going to have as their highest priority the relationship they're in. It could be a career, it could be a spiritual path. But if it is choosing as a primary commitment in their life, a marriage, raising a family, but particularly the personal relationship I'm referring to right now, then their primary characteristic is they can be and expect an all-in black and white commitment. And very, very, very important here. And that actually even brings out what the shadow of it is. If the primary commitment is the black and white commitment to a long-term relationship, it can actually be difficult to ascertain when the commitment to the commitment can be an addiction like anything else. So it's harder to know when it's time to end it. And that could also apply in this archetype to the commitment to a profession, or even a commitment to a spiritual path.
Right.
And this is one of the culture bearer ones. It's ones that's in the world: action and nobility of purpose, 100% all in. I wanted to maybe mention one other thing about this, because currently Chiron is in Aries. And so there's a major thing going on with archetypal masculine in the culture currently. And we're trying to suggest in our school that we really need to revision the way we've understood Aries in the masculine over the last few thousand years. To have it not be about I have to defeat the enemy, or we must win, or professional warfare, or war in general. And so I always like to suggest that the main ingredient of this new emerging Aries for men or women is the capacity with strength to not comply or to develop boundaries around your own sovereignty and autonomy, so that if one is feeling violated, that you have the right to stand up and defend that incursion. So it's the strength to be able to not comply or to say no to what is against the integrity and the sovereignty of the person.
Right.
Okay, let's do the
Stand up
next one.
for what you believe in. I did have something on Aries that I think is important.
Yes, please. Yes, go
Yeah,
ahead.
in the intimacy area. We know Aries will claim you. It'll be loyal, it'll claim you,
Yes.
it'll stick by you, as you were just saying. But it's new to the intricacies of relationship and doesn't quite understand all of that. We've kind of talked about that in another part of this
Right.
series. So if it's challenged by personal intimacy, what might that look like with someone else? And maybe that other person, in order for it to work, I don't know. I'm wondering, how does that work? How do you have a successful relationship?
Yeah, the answer to that, and actually why we did think of including it as part of this discussion, the 6 relationship paths. The reality is Aries needs Libra. So Libra is quite aware of saying they need Aries. Have you ever tried to see 2 Libra types together? There's, what do you want to do, dear? Well, I don't know. What do you want to do, dear? You know, Aries can make the decisions, but it's less likely Aries says they need Libra, you know. But you're correct that the classic Aries type is more on the outside. It's more external. And often if a woman is with a guy with Mars and Aries, it's like he needs to be valued for the fact that he can commit. He stands by you. There's a certain mobility there, but he sure may need training about intimacy. and we're speaking here of the Aries type that is in a relationship. I mean, we could go on and on about other types. You know, um, it's like what happens on the road. That's their own business. You know, it's not, you understand my point, right? So
Right, right,
there's a nobility of the Aries type, male or female, to to hold firm to the relationship commitment, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're particularly good at intimacy.
right. So you just need to know that, and maybe they're open to being trained in that area, hopefully. It just depends, I guess, on the person.
Totally.
So, yeah, so let's go to Cancer.
Yeah, so the reason why we're putting this in again is the fact that, as I mentioned, that now there's this whole, the front lines of archetypal masculine on the world stage for both men and women is Cancer.
Mhm.
And this is to take it somehow beyond the I only love my kids, or only love my clan, I only love my country, which is the classic default of ordinary Cancer. But it's to be able to expand it to the whole world and to be able to see that the providing of nourishment applies to all human beings. And this is particularly interesting for men because there are some men who can, it's less to talk about for women because most all women are trained to know what Cancer, the great mother is. You know, all women are allegedly supposed to have this characteristic. It's the most understandable version of the sacred feminine, is this providing of nourishment thing. But there are men who have Mars in Cancer that wish to be valued for their capacity to provide nourishment. The leading edge of this, though, in patriarchy, it was all about just simply providing the security, like the financial security, let's say, as opposed to the woman really feeling nurtured personally by the dedicated, committed partner. And that to me is the leading edge of this. And for women to actually recognize that, you know, there's a lot that you might be involved with some guy that is a great provider of security to you, or he makes a lot of money or whatever, but maybe he does desire, if you're open to receiving, to be valued for his capacity to provide personal nourishment in a relationship, you know. So that's coming up a lot in the sessions I do right now, because there's a lot of wounded men around this, you know,
Mm.
where the strength of a man can be his capacity in a yin way, but strength to provide nourishment to the kids he loves, to the woman he loves, or the man he loves. I mean,
Right,
again, we're not just dealing with heterosexual stuff here.
right. Can you speak to, because Cancer's a hierarchical
Yes.
sign, and it really creates space for the other to be vulnerable. So sometimes I think it can be invulnerable or not want to share its own feelings. But what about that hierarchical,
Right.
leaning? How does that play out?
Yeah. The shadow of it comes from the fact that it has a hierarchical nature. So the example I might give here is that, let's say a boy or a girl has had the experience of an entirely safe mother or father, where they're totally taken care of, they're nurtured wonderfully. How do you translate that into horizontal, where basically you're not projecting that, looking just for a partner who's like mom or dad, So that's why I always like to say that if a woman has a man or woman has the projected image in Cancer, um, that you you don't. The trick is not wanting to just find someone to be your mom or dad, but to actually have it be a healthy horizontal situation where it's personal and the quality is in providing nourishment, so that it's a way of transferring it from hierarchical to horizontal. That
Right.
I think we'll probably get into that more in part 5.
Right, true. The other thing on Cancer I wanted to bring up is that, it's so identified with giving. And so I'm imagining intimacy wise, the receiving is probably difficult for them.
Right. I mean, we could have actually had a relation. We could have had a category which is givers, right?
Yeah,
There's ones that their whole definition is about giving,
yeah.
and they're not trained to receive.
Mhm.
What any good giver needs, I mean, not a controlling giver, but someone who is naturally just wanting to share and give, is to be with someone who's a good receiver. But there's been so much wounding around this, where that those that can come on too strong as being a giver, and then they're controlling givers, and that's all they know how to do, then the person who's a receiver doesn't trust it. They think there's some sort of motive in it. But any authentic good giver does need someone who's open to receiving. And so we're talking about a lot of you know areas of trauma in the culture that are up for healing right now.
Right. And something you always say about the givers, or I guess maybe we should say Cancer and Pisces, is to learn to, especially Cancer, to nourish themselves. That'll
Right.
help them move through that
That
too.
would be the whole sacred marriage aspect of
Yeah,
it, is to learn how to provide nourishment to yourself and not expect it from a positive or negative version of the external father or mother.
right. Okay, let's move to Scorpio.
Boy, there's so much that could be said about this one. Um, it's an actional one. It's way more over toward the yang aspect of it. Um, Maybe one of the ways to best understand it is as a polarity, as a resonant polarity with Taurus. Taurus receives, but Scorpio is seeking out. Um, I think I've often given the imagery of like honey. The Scorpio Taurus axis is like honey. Taurus is the honey, and Scorpio is interested in finding the greatest honey. But this is an example of where it's visceral. This is not an intellectual kind of thing. It's like you either feel it or you don't. And exploring life force energies, an end in itself, desires, strong feelings. Um, uh, if you don't feel anything, well, then the Scorpio is not alive. There's a lot of repression in this area. Actually, there's whole schools psychotherapy that are involved with the body armoring, Reichian work, breath work. Those are all things that seem that are designed really to open this up. The orgone energy, the chi energy, the prana energy, the kundalini energy, which has been very much, judged against. And um, for a lot of people to think it's just scary, scary within themselves or scary to other people. Um, so if you have Venus or Mars in Scorpio, your investigation is to go to the edge of aliveness. And this hugely important issue. We could actually, I could do actually a whole video blog just on the Scorpio Taurus axis and the challenges that are associated with that. Um, so I think these cards invoke it quite well. I mean, we have kind of this uh, kind of a wisdom shaman Scorpio there, and then we have the temple dancer, very erotic aspect of the feminine. It's like a Shakti energy, very strong in this particular one, and it refers to the most actional young expression of the feminine principle. Because I mean, Leo and Aries certainly yes, but they're not connected to the feeling function. This is embodied. It's an embodied expression of this.
Yeah. They're both self-exploration signs, but just speaking about Scorpio, sometimes I think Scorpio might be so immersed in the experience, and maybe we touched on this before when we were talking about Taurus last time, but it can be so immersed in the experience that it can almost be like the other isn't even
Right.
really present. And that could create some issues in the area of intimacy.
Well, that it'll be true for Taurus also,
Mm.
because it's like that. There's that ancient those ancient statues of Aphrodite
Mhm.
with her lover. She's looking at herself in the mirror at the same time. The
Mm.
experience is for her, and it's very true that unbridled Scorpio, without any empathy, they're getting off on the energy that they're invoking. And they're
Mm.
not really caring so much that maybe whoever they're with is being drained by the experience. So there's a lot of intensity with it, and certainly a lot of shadow with it. But it's something that needs training. But you're
Yeah,
correct in what you're saying. It's self-exploration. So it's not really about the other.
right.
Although even though it's in a personal category. So it's the
Mhm.
personal experience, their own personal experience that is important here. Mhm.
Right. Okay. All right. The next one on the list is Sagittarius.
Which we did discuss in the categories. This is a commitment to freedom, the quest for meaning and purpose. It's more logos or consciousness based. The kind of relationship that happens with this is more like either whoever you meet on the trail, but it's also more like camaraderie,
Mhm.
um, who you're exploring together with. What I've frequently noticed about those in relationship with Sagittarius or its resonant polarity, Gemini, that you can be in a committed relationship, certainly with this, but it's only maybe 20% is dealing with the personal thing happening between the two people. It's unlike the really personal ones where it can be 50%, and sometimes it becomes codependent when it's beyond 50%, where the whole thing is all based upon whether you're with someone or how they're doing. But with Sagittarius Gemini relationships, it's like maybe it's only 20% is dealing with the relationship itself. It's all the other stuff they're doing. All
Mm.
the their quests for meaning and purpose, their philosophies, their and just all of their investigations, which they can do together or not.
Yeah. Have you found in your dealings with this archetype, maybe a tendency to idealize a relationship or to feel like your relationships just never measure up to what you have in your mind about it?
I think that idealization might be more for Libra or with Pisces.
Hmm.
This one, it almost veers into the category of self-interest, actually. Where it's much more about my quest. If you want to come with me, that's good.
Mhm.
They're going to do it anyway. It's a response. It's a responsibility to break new ground. And when we talk about the relationship intent, next class, next part 5, there is a very unique expression of this in a committed relationship, but it's not one that has anything to do with over involvement or with there's a lot of spaciousness or space that's needed in the relationship, right? So maybe I'm just looking at how much time we've gone now. We might want to was there one more, and then we can maybe there's one
Cap-
more. Let's do it.
Capricorn. We'll just
Let's
go to
do it.
Capricorn.
Mhm.
And we, yeah, kind of talked about that being in the sense that it's also hierarchical and kind of needs to be in control and could end up being the teacher in relationships. And but one thing I was really wondering about and touched on before, Capricorn is a builder. So if it's committed in a pair bond and wants to build an incredible relationship, I imagine this energy would be well suited to that if that's what they're committed to.
Without question. And what's interesting about these two, there's so the resonant polarity between the two of them is so evident. And back in the late 60s, there was a tendency to equate Cancer with mother and Capricorn for father, but we now know that's interchangeable. So there can actually be in a relationship, for example, it can be actually the one who's biologically female, who's the more Capricornian one. Biological male can be more the Cancerian one. It's like putting Cancer or Capricorn on the midheaven or the IC. It can just flip back and forth. They're so similar. The
Mm.
difference is that Cancer has that capacity to be more personal in a hierarchical sense, parent to child. Capricorn is impersonal generally. And so therefore it's more about the practicality of it, to hold it. Both of them can hold it together, but one is water feeling function and the other is earth sensation function. Um, these two can really marvelously work together. They both are elder places on the wheel of life. The circle of elders would have both the grandmother and the grandfather, I guess you could say. The prime minister, female and male, different versions of that. The elders on the circle. But when it comes to personal relationship, it's that same thing we brought up about Cancer, which is how do you translate that into the horizontal axis? So we can have that same problem like I'm looking for a guy to be my dad, or which is not going to work because then you're still in the old hierarchical approach. So in order for personal relationship to happen between Cancer and Capricorn, it has to be transformed. And this is a leading edge now of these energies right now. And same thing with a lot of them. They're all being transformed into something different. Virgo used to believe that if you were personal, it would blow out the circuits, so you had to remain impersonal. So now, so that to be able to bring personal into Virgo is equally important issue than it would be for what we're speaking of now for Capricorn and Cancer. So these two have the same challenges, but they're also not necessarily just identified with, well, Capricorn's got to be the masculine version and Cancer has to be the feminine version. No, we have many women who, with the Capricornian archetype, who have no interest really in being personal at all. They build businesses, they run corporations and so on, and then you can see the shadow of it, which is that they're not personal at all. So they make decisions that are not based upon the well-being of who's working for them.
Mhm. All right, I'm going to stop the share there. That was wonderful.
Great sharing always on this, and I think the more we do this, the more we're able to tease out some really great stuff here.
Yeah.
Um, so our project is ongoing, and so the next time it'll be looking more at the relationship axes, but also the counseling aspect, you know, how
Yeah.
two people who are in relationship, or two people who aren't but are looking for a good one, how to recognize the other,
Yeah.
and also, as you and I have discussed before, and this is more on a popular level, I guess you could say, what are the foreplay techniques, you know? One just quick example, you know, if you're trying to make it work with an Aquarian type, let's meditate together, or, you know, let's read intellectual books, or, you know, let's explore that first.
Right.
Well, if it's Scorpio or Taurus, it's going to be something completely different, you know, so that we can go through all of those different ones. It can be very
Yeah.
helpful.
I think
Mm.
people will be interested in that. That'll be great. All right. Thank you, Daniel.
Great sharing again with you, and we'll look forward to part 5 coming up in a few months. So good for
Sounds
now.
great.
Thank you, Elise. Next
All
time.
right. Yeah.
Bye.
Until next time. Bye.